This may look like a regular Audi SUV, except it is very different. It's called the e-Tron and it's Audi's first pure electric vehicle. The e-Tron started from scratch as an electric vehicle, so there were no compromises of taking out engines and trying to work out where to put battery packs. It was done from the ground up, so things like the batteries obviously in the floor, an electric motor front, another electric motor in the rear. So all-wheel drive gives you that quattro system that Audi's been marketing for decades now. That ground-up design also means really clever use of interior space. So in the back seats, for example, it's only a 5-seater, but in the rear there, you can pretty easily fit 3 across the rear. You don't have that big transmission tunnel between the seats, so it's a fairly flat floor. Decent space in the rear, also a reasonable sized boot. You even get a space saver tyre in the back. There's a sense of normality here, regular Audi in terms of the interior. Things like the screens, for example. You've got the 2 infotainment screens looking after everything from your ventilation to navigation and audio systems. You've got a digital instrument cluster, but this could be any other Audi in terms of the way it's presented. Couple of little tweaks here and there, things like the gear selector, for example. It's actually a fixed selector and it's got a sort of sliding component on the end of it where you select whether you want to go forward or backwards. And obviously in the display, the instrument cluster, you've got some different settings there, things like a power gauge rather than a tachometer, so telling you how much power you're using. Speaking of power, there are 2 choices. You've either got the 50 as they call it or the 55. It's the 55 I'm driving here, so all up 300 kilowatts of power. That's pretty much plenty. 0 to 100k an hour time is claimed at 5.7 seconds, and you've got that really nice surge, that rush. As soon as you press the throttle, it just sort of launches and goes. And does it all pretty silently as well. You've got the choice between regular D for drive or S for sport mode. The odd thing when you select sport mode, it actually gives you more power. So whereas in most Audis, all it does is adjust things like the throttle response and maybe the gear shifting points, for example, you certainly still get that throttle response change. It's much sharper in the sport mode, but you also get what they call boost, an extra chunk of power on top of the 100% gauge that you've already got there. So when you step on it, you've still got reasonable punch in D mode, then select sport. Yeah, okay, gives you a little bit of a kick, but we're talking tiny bits here. There's no gearboxes or transmissions in the e-Tron, it's a single speed, but I've still got these shift paddles, but they're actually used to adjust the regenerative braking, how much energy you can recoup when you lift off the accelerator. So put it in its mildest mode and it's effectively like coasting. So you lift off the throttle and it's like basically stepping off the accelerator in a petrol powered car. Push it once on the left hand down one and you feel it just give a little bit more regen. Push it for a second time and it's the max regen, so you're actually getting about 0.3 Gs of deceleration there, so it's starting to put a lot of that electricity back into the battery. Audi's also put plenty of thought into the charging for the e-Tron. So you've got one of these fancy opening charging doors. You've also got another one on the other side. So you can do an AC charge, the slower home charges, at up to 11 kilowatts from either side of the car. On the other side, we've got a fast charger, a DC charger, which will give you up to 150 kilowatts of fast charging. Now, obviously there are EVs out there that'll do a higher charge rate than that, but the difference is Audi says they've put in some pretty tricky software, some battery management, so that it can maintain that 150 kilowatt charge for longer, therefore swifter charging. The claimed range for the e-Tron is somewhere around 400 kilometres, according to that newer WLTP cycle. The range predictor on this car is, when it was full, it was suggesting something over 300, maybe 330, 340, somewhere around there. But Audi says that'll actually, once you start getting that regen effect, you'll start potentially boosting that range a little bit. But look, safely 300 Ks, probably more. There's lots of regular Audi in the way this thing deals with corners. The steering's actually got a fair bit of meat to it. It's quite nice, particularly on a country road when you pitch into a corner. It gives you a bit of feedback, gives you a bit of feeling there. But at the same time, it's pretty light, certainly very agile. You know you're dealing with a fair bit of weight, but it is hidden relatively well. And certainly having those batteries down low, you've got 700 kilograms of batteries, having them way down low in the car keeps that centre of gravity down. So you can throw it at a corner, and the poise of it, the way it settles in the bend is really nice. The e-Tron also has a suitable dose of technology, including these: no mirrors, or at least no traditional mirrors. Instead, you've got these tiny cameras that project an image onto a small screen on the inside of the door. Now, the advantage of that is you've got a smaller exterior mirror unit, so that means less aerodynamic drag, more electric range. It also means that they can tailor the image depending on the exterior lighting. There's also loads of tech elsewhere, but it's nothing outside what you would get in any other Audi. So, you know, it's your usual array of active safety features, your digital screens and so on inside. That all comes down to trying to make this car as normal, as regular as another Audi. One thing you get in the e-Tron, which outdoes every other electric car on the market to date, is choice. You get a whole bunch of options and choices that you just don't get in other models. Sure, Tesla gives you different battery ranges and performance outputs. You get that in this car. You can have, as I said, the 50 or the 55. You can then choose between your body style, whether you get the regular SUV with a bit more boot space and so on, or whether you get the sportier looking Sportback. And you can then choose various option packs. And the e-Tron will spawn a family of its own. This is only the start of the e-Tron story for Audi. So there's a smaller SUV coming called the Q4. There's also an e-Tron GT, a very high performance car. And there'll be more models down the track. So as I said, it's the start of the e-Tron story. It's a pretty impressive start. They've certainly done a very convincing job with the regular Audi e-Tron.